Alright folks, Casual Dad here for my second ever Warhammer Combat Cards post. I want to take a minute to run through all of the new secondary traits that were given to legendary and epic cards. And just a quick minute of background to cover the details that would make that make sense if you don't know. So Warhammer Combat Cards is a deck building, card collecting game set in the Warhammer 40k universe. And every single card that you get has a set rarity. And you can see that by the banner here. So this level 10 is gray, that's common. This one is blue at level 9, and that's rare. Then we've got purple for epic, and gold for legendary. Now each card also has, again, that level, which is marked by the progression of cards. And this progression of cards is the number of copies of that card you have to get to the next level. Each card also has a set special trait, so that as it levels up, it gains more health, it gets more attack stats, and then it also levels up a special ability, in this case, Taunt. And it goes from level 1 to 4, with 4 being the maximum. And Common has this progression tree, Rare has this progression tree, slightly different. And then Epic has this one, and Legendary has this one. And so I wanted to take a minute to go through every single faction and cover every single legendary and epic card. I'm going to do bodyguards first and then go through to warlords so we can kind of get a context of what cards are available to that warlord when we talk about the warlord themselves. It's a lot to cover, so I'm going to dive right into it. And just some real quick hot takes before I dive into it, sorry about that. Epic cards will get as of last week, epic and legendary cards get a second trait. So we saw common and rare have just one trait, and then your epic cards will have 2. And you can see at the end of this tier, you can see both that level 4 primary trait and then that level 2 secondary trait. So at max level, your epic cards will have both a max level primary trait and then they'll have a rank 2 secondary trait. And then your legendary cards also now get a secondary trait, but they will end up at max level with level 4 of both. And they'll get level 4 of their primary trait earlier, you can see right here, and then they will get that max level of their secondary trait just at the very end when they're totally maxed out. Now, right off the bat, that makes legendary cards more valuable just by default, because they have that cap that's the max level of that trait. There are a fair number of traits out there that really aren't impactful in the game until at least trait level 3, and since epic cards can't even get that high, a lot of those traits are not exactly a wash, because every card is gaining something, but they're just a little bit weaker than you would see if they were able to get higher. So we're going to run through it, I'll talk about these more in some detail, but what that means right out of the gate, hot take, is that legendary cards are now significantly more valuable, not only because they can get that max level secondary trait, but also because they get their secondary trait quite a bit higher. Epic cards only unlock that secondary trait at, level 9? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yes, it's level 9. And epic cards also are the slowest cards in your collection to level up, just because of the combination of copies needed to level, combined with the rarity of drops. They're almost as rare to drop as legendary cards because there are more of them, so your random drops will be less likely to give you multiple copies of the same one. And then also they just need so many more cards per level, so they're very slow to progress. So that secondary trait, while cool, is going to be a whole lot less impactful for your epics than it will be for your legendaries. By contrast, your legendaries get their second trait at level 3. They get it right there. Not only is that really, really early, but it's also just not very many cards to get to that. So if you've been playing for any length of time, most of your legendary cards already have their secondary traits active, where if you're anything like me, the vast majority of your epics will not. I think I have one epic card that actually has a secondary trait right now. So we're just going to run through it. I'm going to start on the left here with Aeldari. Again, I'm going to start with the bodyguards and go to the warlords next. So first one, right out of the gate, we have the Incarn, and he gets endless. Already had that primary trait of regen, which is really powerful on a card that has this much health, but then endless just makes this card so much more valuable. It's still almost 80 points, it's hard to slot into any deck, and even with endless, people can still ignore him and kill your other bodyguards and get to your warlord more quickly. So he's going to be more fieldable now, especially once you get him to that max level regen with max level endless. He's just going to be impossible to move. If you stack the rest of the board with tough cards that are hard to remove as well, or just extremely aggressive cards, this guy could be much more serviceable. And it does seem like a lot of the cards that got the most powerful traits are the ones that you just weren't seeing. And the Incarn wasn't really performing much at kind of the top ladder levels. Next up, we have one of my very favorites, the Wraithseer, excuse me. This one already has the Psychic Blast, or Psionic Blast. This is an incredibly powerful trait, and so the secondary trait it got is a little bit lesser. Again, being epic, it's going to top out at level 2. Gaining 8 wounds per turn is not nothing, but again, that's only at the absolute maximum level that you'll see that. So this is a bit of a wash. It's a cool trait to have. It did gain something, especially if you're already healing in like a Rakarth deck, which we'll talk about in a minute. That can stack and be pretty powerful. But the biggest thing that this gained, with the addition of the Omni level, and let me see if this lets me scroll over there. Looks like not. Okay. But what this also did for epic and legendary cards is the extra levels. That Omni level at the end there is a flat bonus to all stats and health. So it actually, at top level, is just a more powerful card than it was. So it definitely gained something, but considering how slowly epic cards level, how low that regen trait's going to be, it's just kind of a wash. Now the comparison between these two cards, the first card we looked at is a card that really wasn't performing, you weren't seeing it very much, it's not all that powerful right now, so the secondary trait is more powerful, whereas in this case, it's already an extremely powerful card, so it got kind of the least, say, abusive trait it could get. So, not bad, but it's fine. I'm still going to run it, but I was already running it anyway. Next up, we have our Wraithseer. Got the Outflank trait, which is a nice bonus. Again, epic, so you're going to have to get it really high level to get that. Again, got the Omni level, so it's a little bit better. But it's fine. It's still a really good card, so it didn't get a super powerful upgrade there. Outflank is still probably more useful than Regeneration, especially at that rank 2, especially in a deck like Lilith, if you have a spot for this in there, because you can deploy it multiple times and get that trait multiple times. So it's still good, but middling trait. Oh, next up we have one of the most improved cards in the game. I don't know if this wasn't performing or what, but this seems just insanely powerful. This is the Crimson Hunter. This is an extremely powerful range shooting card. It's both fairly cheap and has a really high range stat in a faction that really does well with ranged attacks. So this is super, super strong. And it got Precision Shot. So when it deploys, it shoots for a set amount of its range stat. And at max level, that is its full range stat. Now what you're looking at right now is level 8. That was previously its maximum ranged attack. Even that hitting for 150 damage when it lands on the table, and that's not including any bonuses, and if you are in a Zephyr Blade deck where it's got its ranged attacks pumping up all game, but when other cards are dying, like this is amazing. And even at this rank with just that level 2 precision shot, it's dropping for, like, what is that, 70 damage, 80 damage. And again, I have it in my Lilith deck, so it's throwing out 80 damage and then shooting without flank, plus whatever bonuses I have on the board. This card is nuts. Even more so, the legendaries now have those 2 Omni levels, so what was previously its maximum range damage of 147 now can be bumped twice more. This card is really good. So I'm very happy to have it at high level. Look forward to maxing that out one day. Alright, next up, there are quite a few here, so we're going to keep zooming through them. Karandras, never said that out loud, the Phoenix Lord of the Striking Scorpions. This guy has always been okay, but he's got a price point where he competes with all of the other Phoenix Lords and just has never stood out against Jane Czar. He got the very thematic Outflank. Again, epic, so he tops out at range 2 of Outflank. Already had that ready melee, which is very powerful for him. He's good, but I don't know that he improved necessarily all that much. I'm still probably not going to run him very often. More likely, especially since that Omni level does let him hit a higher peak damage, but he's okay. Both a card that wasn't really seen very much, that also isn't improved very much, so he's probably staying on the proverbial shelf. Next up, we have Baharoth. I got my top 6% finish in the ladder a couple seasons back to make sure I got this guy. At level 1, he's already quite scary, but he levels up very quickly. I wish I could go through that. Oh yeah, there we go. I can't scroll through that. Yeah, so max level, he's hitting for 100 damage when he drops, plus max level Outflank. And then he's got 100 damage he can just swing in, and he's very fast, so he's likely to go first in a deck that has other fast cards. And that's just his initiative stat here. He's got a high initiative value, so there's a good chance that he will speed up his deck and give you that first turn, so he could be your opening play, and could potentially remove something before it even gets a chance to do anything. Very strong. I think that's a slightly lower price point. Yeah, a couple points cheaper than Karandras. He still is kind of iffy, but that Furious Charge really significantly improved him. Because the outflank was fine, but he didn't really stand out that much. Furious Charge is one of the best traits in the game, especially if you can get max level with a decently high melee stat. Very good. Next up we have Morgan Ra, which is... oh man, he's already really scary. He already has that precision shot for dropping the range damage when he plays. He's at 35, tied with Baharoth, who we just saw. And he got Barrage. It's only Barrage level 2. Again, he's epic, so he doesn't get to that Barrage level 4. But his ranged attack stat is already so high, any level of Barrage is very powerful, and in combination with Precision Shot, he will hit everything, he will hit multiple cards on the board when he comes into play. And again, being paired with Lilith, who's my personal favorite Eldar warlord, you can do that multiple times a game, which is just incredibly powerful. That combination of... this is the first one that really highlights two traits that perfectly work together, both that precision shot and that spray. I'm sorry, I should talk about barrage. So whenever a card with barrage shoots, it will hit both its primary target, the card in front of it, and then also any cards adjacent to that. For less damage, of course, but still, at rank 1, it's 25% of an already 86 at not even max. He's going to be hitting really hard, and hitting more cards than he was before. One of the biggest limitations of Morgan Ra is his health is good, but it's not that high for a 35-point card. And he could be blocked. So being able to still deal that damage to adjacent targets really helps him kind of overcome that. Then we've got Jane Zar, who comes up a lot because Fear is an extremely powerful trait to help an expensive card survive. She has very low health because of that for her cost, but max level Fear is very good. And again, I personally consider Furious Charge and Precision Shot, those attack on drop traits, to be two of the best. Even rank 1 Furious Charge is a free attack. That is very, very good. At rank 2, it's doing what, 80%? 60%. So rank 2 is doing 60% of melee damage on the drop. She's already doing 100, so you're dropping for 60 damage, which is no joke. Especially since she was already being taken quite a bit without any secondary trait. That is awesome. Then, of course, we've got our most powerful and glassiest Farseer on the board, who hits for an absolutely insane volume of fire. So I just talked about how Furious Charge and Precision Shot, those attack on drop traits, are incredibly powerful. Him getting this, what's this? Warp Surge, where he also attacks on the drop, is extremely powerful, and he again has that attack of about 100. Even hitting for 60% of that is excellent, especially in an Eldrad deck. Eldrad wasn't run very often, but his bonus to psychic attacks, if they're subsequent, really loves that. You want more cards with that Warp Surge so they can trigger his damage bonus that we'll talk about when we get to him. That is a really good improvement. Again, a card you actually saw played quite a bit, so he's one of the ones that's a little more surprising that he got a more powerful additional trait. Going right on up to our exiled Prince Uriel, the Corsair Prince. So he started with Inspire, which is good, especially on kind of a ranged card or a melee card. He's pretty good at shooting, but his melee is stronger, but that balance of being able to do both is really nice. Decent price point, very high hit points for 32, Outflank being terrific, and he now will bring both max level Inspire and max level Outflank. Again, he'll benefit from this very early because at, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At level 5, one level from where I am now, he gets that third tier Inspire, and level 3 Inspire is excellent. That's a very powerful trait. Outflank at level 1 is not nothing, and he will quickly get to that Outflank level 2 and then can max out at that Outflank level, level 4, because he is legendary. So yeah, good one, improved. He was already fairly powerful and seeing some play, so he got the Outflank trait, which is one of the... weaker is just the wrong word for it, but it's not one of the better traits he could have gotten. It's still good, and it is very thematic. It plays very much with who he is as a character. Next up, oh yeah, we're getting into the good stuff. Furious Charge on the Solitaire. Woo! So this guy swings incredibly hard for his price point. His max melee is 136. Now that's because he doesn't have any other attack stats, so he trades for that. His health is also pretty high for that attack, and he already had Death Blow. So even if you kill this thing quickly, he's gonna hit you for some of that melee attack. His max melee damage is now higher because of those Omni levels, and that attack on drop is just absolutely incredible. No surprise, this guy also is in my Lilith deck, and that deck just shot through the roof in terms of its power. Between him and the Crimson Hunter, it's just excellent. And again, being legendary, he's going to level up quickly and get those high-level traits fairly early. Next up, we have the Grotesque. Already had Berserk, and a high-level Berserk is really good on a card like this. He's Dark Eldar. He's really built to be in that Rakarth deck that's already healing. So even though regen is one of the weaker traits I talked about, he is cheaper at 28. Level 2 regen plus Rakarth is a very, very tanky card, especially starting at 202, that also heals very quickly, both with that trait and then also with that regen. Again, it's epic, so to get the most out of it, you're only going to see it at the max level that will take forever to get to. But if you get there, this card is going to be pretty powerful. And because of the combination of the price point and the Enrage, he's really going to benefit a lot from that regen, a lot more, I think, than other cards that are equivalent will. But especially in those Rakarth decks. Next we'll go to Drazar. This is actually a combination we're seeing a lot. So this is Big Game Hunter, so against cards that cost 40 points or more, does bonus damage. And it's a significant amount of bonus damage. Stacking that with a Furious Charge so you get to hit, you're actually hitting significantly harder against the targets you should be putting Drazar up against. And that's kind of a key point. One of the biggest weaknesses for Big Game Hunter was it encourages you to put this card against something that's very powerful and likely to kill him back quickly. So I've seen quite a few cards with Big Game Hunter also get Furious Charge to make sure that they'll get some benefit of that trait before whatever awful thing you put them down against smacks them back down. So that's a really good combination. He's got a high melee, so even the rank 2 Furious Charge is still pretty good, and we're getting to the cheaper price point where it is more impactful for the cost. So I'm sort of stocks higher on these guys than I was at the lower guys just because they are cheaper, so you get more benefit for the points. Next up, the old Harlequin Shadowseer. And now this one is pretty powerful in certain decks. The biggest reason you take this card though is because it's got shields. It's a 20-point card that has a bunch of shields. Can attack in Psychic, but as you can see those attack values are extremely low. So it's a utility piece, mostly used as a blocker and kind of a light Psychic counterattacker. Can strip shields, can counterattack a tough Psyker. It's a great card, but isn't really there to do damage. And so thematically that outflank is actually a really good add for it. Doesn't really add much to the card. It's fine. But it again was a very powerful card that was seeing a lot of play already, so it got a weaker trait, or a weaker secondary trait. Cruising right on through, we are almost done with Eldar. We are done with Eldar Bodyguards. This is a big slate of warlords, so this is going to take a second. I'm only going to cover the rare and legendaries, or rare and epic. Excuse me, epic and legendary, God. Which is most of them, but we'll go quick. So Zephyrblade, his core ability is that every time a card dies, whether it's your card or an enemy card, every single card in play and in your deck, every friendly card rather, gets +3 to its ranged attack. It's a small bonus, but you can fill your deck with small cards, and now you've got a couple endless cards. Well, no, you're probably not taking the Incarn, never mind. So you sort of pick your soft targets and sacrifice some of your cards to build up really powerful ranged attacks. Really likes Ready, really likes Outflank, really likes cards that already have a high range stat, really loves Mogan Ra and that Crimson Hunter, who both gained much harder hitting ranged attacks, especially on the drop. So if you hold your Mogan Ra, you hold your Crimson Hunter, when they land with this guy, they would be absolutely devastating. He also has the perk of being the cheapest Eldar Warlord, so you can really stack your decks with him with any combination of those bodyguards. And you can really kind of make a smaller deck that's harder hitting with some of those epics and legendaries and lean on being more aggressive at the risk of being a little bit less durable. So I would put him, and sorry, he already had the ranged Ready. He gained the Inspire trait, which is good. This again is a case where he was already a very powerful, high-performing warlord, so he got one of the lesser traits. Level 2 Inspire is fine, especially since your endgame card's already going to have a really high attack stat. You'll actually see more benefit from that than it looks like in some cases, but it's one of the weaker traits he could have gotten. Next up we have Rakarth, and his trait, anytime a card dies, all of your friendly cards in play or in your deck gain 7 wounds, 7 hit points. So that's where I talked about that additional healing on the Incarn and on the Grotesque. Really, really powerful ability, extremely powerful ability. Combines very well with regen, combines really powerful with Medicae, which he also has. So you had that root Medicae. He drops on the board with a significant amount of health does his heal, and he's also banking health all game long. So even though his base HP looks a little bit low, you consider how many cards are dying throughout the game, he starts with significantly more, and then has his Medicae on top of that. Add to that level 2 regeneration. It's not fundamentally going to change him, but it's going to give him that little extra staying power that he didn't already have. But still, that kind of keeps him in parity with the other warlords. He didn't necessarily gain that much relative to some others. Jump to Lilith. My absolute favorite Eldar warlord. She has this insane ability where anytime one of your cards kills an opposing card, it returns to your hand. That protects it from return fire, keeps it alive a little bit longer, and then lets you re-trigger its on-drop ability. So outflank, if you shoot on drop, if you do melee on drop, extremely powerful ability. Even just for the option to redeploy your cards on the board is crazy powerful, even if you didn't get to trigger their abilities again. She is bonkers. My Lilith deck is consistently my highest performer, tops out around 3,700, 3,800 trophies. Really, really high up. Easy to get there, super fun to play, and benefited hugely from all of the traits that we saw added to the game. So this is a bit of a head scratcher. She already had outflank, which is fine. It's not terrific, but she's not really supposed to be played. You really benefit from her ability throughout the game. If she is played, you put yourself in a really vulnerable position, because she doesn't have a ton of hit points, only has a melee attack, doesn't really have any defense. But she gained Furious Charge, which is fantastic. So she doesn't hit that hard. I mean, 100 of the Furious Charge is good, especially from a warlord. The key to this is if you have to play her, it lets you quickly remove a card, where before if you played her, it was pretty rare that she would actually kill a card and go back to your hand. By the time you got to playing her, chances are she was going on the board, you were hoping you got them before they got you. So this is a great addition, and this is really thematic. She's a fast, hard-hitting succubus assassin. She is known for fighting in these super laser tank battles, just without wearing basically anything. You can see her in that leotard there. So this is, again, very thematic that she's fast and murdery. Really combos well with her ability. I would argue that she is the most improved warlord in the Eldar faction, which is bonkers because she already was probably the best warlord in the Eldar faction. Next up we have Eldrad, who already had that Brotherhood of Psykers ability, so any Psyker on the board, for each Psyker on the board he gets a flat % bonus to his attack damage, which is already very high, so that was extremely powerful. He's also got decent hit points, especially since he can't boost that at all. At 45, he is vulnerable to Big Game Hunter, so that is something to watch out for. But in addition to that Brotherhood of Psykers, he also gained Inspire. And again, being legendary, he can go up to rank 4 Inspire. So this was previously his top psychic damage. It can now go even higher. He already had that level 3 Brotherhood of Psykers, and now just tacked on top, he's got that Inspiring Presence. An Inspiring Presence is one of the ones you see added the most to warlords that didn't really need a buff. In his case, because his damage is so high, and because his bodyguard damage is so high, and they're already buffed from his ability, that actually is a much more powerful addition than it would be to any other warlord. Also seeing some of the key psychic cards getting bonuses, especially that Trial-Eorn Farseer getting the attack on drop, again stacks with his ability, I should say this. Every time a card in play on your side makes a psychic attack, every following psychic attack will then get a flat bonus. So up to 90%. If you have Trial-Eorn do his attack on drop, that's already 30%, so he himself will benefit from his follow-up psychic attack in that turn, and then every other card also will as well. So that's really, really powerful, that combo. One of the central cards in his deck is now better. He also can benefit from the Incarn. It's an extremely risky deck to build that because he's expensive and the Incarn's expensive. But with the extra durability of being endless, that actually works much better than it did before. So I'm really curious to see him work. I think he's going to perform better than he has, which is good because he hasn't been performing that well. And also one of my favorite characters in the tabletop, so that's cool to see. Last but not least, we have the Avatar. The Avatar is the most expensive by far, highest hit points, hits like a truck. At max level, he's got just this insane damage. And his trait, if any card dies, a random one of your cards deployed gets that plus 15 melee attack. It's just a flat buff, can stack it indefinitely. So you see Jane Zar in these decks a lot, you see some regen cards in these decks a lot. Cards that have a lot of staying power and high melee that will get kills, get that damage buff, and be able to carry through and not die for a while. Because this is a deck where you want fewer, more powerful cards to kind of ramp up and get more powerful over the course of the game. So he's another candidate for the Incarn, but that again is a razor-thin deck if you're spending 151 points on just one warlord and one bodyguard. But it is a case where he could work really well, especially with that Endless making that thing just almost unstoppable. And he already had Inspire. As you can see, I already had that rank there. He's gained both significant ranged and melee damage at max level, and then now also has that max level Furious Charge. So he can not only probably land a kill on the opening turn, because you get the Inspire that boosts your melee, you then launch with up to your full attack damage of that 130, be like 160, or it'd be, I'm not going to do that math. It would be a significant hit when he drops, so he could remove a pesky bodyguard, like something Endless that was going to bog him down. He can trigger a bonus for himself, and if it's his turn, you hit for max damage, and then you hit again for max damage. So he is dramatically improved. The Avatar was an extremely intimidating deck. You don't see it perform all that well, just because it's hard to build around and it's a high-risk, high-reward deck. Just because he himself is so expensive, you don't get many bodyguards, and there are a lot of decks that can really take advantage of that. So we saw him get a significant buff. He's one that may get a little out of hand in the coming season, so we'll have to kind of keep an eye on that and see how it goes. But I'm excited to try it, because he's been super fun, but he's one I'll play early in the season and then switch to someone else, because I don't expect him to hang well at the higher ranks, so he needed some help. So that was good. That is Aeldar. We're cruising right along. This video is going to get pretty long. I may take a break in the middle, but I'll try to go ahead and power right through it. Apologies in advance if this gets going. Jumping straight to Necrons. Bodyguards first. Emberesh the Sun Eater, also at a similar price point to the Incarn and Aeldar. Already hit insanely hard, already had that barrage trait, which is super, super powerful. I don't perform all that well with Necrons, but my personal favorite deck to do was this guy with the Canoptic Spider one. We'll get to that in a minute. So because he has that barrage trait, you smack him in the middle of the board, and his barrage attack can trigger the damage bonus for your decks to his left and his right. He's extremely powerful. And this also increased his max range damage, and he got the addition of regeneration. Already sitting at a really high health, very difficult to bring down. Anything that kind of tops off his health, especially in a faction that already has a lot of Medicae healers, that's a very powerful add. This one, because he's so expensive, people hesitated to take him just because there are other options about like 20 points cheaper that can perform similarly well, but also be backed with other bodyguards. I expect both the Omni levels and that regen to see him played a little bit more, especially in a really high-risk, high-reward Stormlord deck, but we'll get to that. Next up, we've got the other Satan Shard, or one of the other Satan Shards, the Void Dragon. Came default with that Big Game Hunter, very powerful trait, and this is one of the more powerful cards that you don't want to put big game hunters against, because it will kill them right back. And so he is one that can really hang, and this gives him, the big game hunter already gave him the edge against other significantly expensive cards, so toe-to-toe with something in the 60-point range, he would tend to come out on top, and has the base damage that's high enough to deal with anything less than that without big game hunter triggering. He also got regeneration. Similar story, I did see this card played quite a bit. He's 11 points cheaper than the Sun Eater, so I expect him to perform even better. So I was already seeing him in some pretty scary decks. I expect he will continue to show. Next up, we've got the other two Satan Shards. These are epic, so a little bit less improved. I really am excited about this. Nightbringer. Already had that fear trait. You can see I already had that max level. Again, is going to get a higher ceiling on his melee damage. His range is going to go up too. And that addition of Furious Charge, even if it's only level 1 or 2 Furious Charge, is really good. Again, I mentioned my favorite warlord is the one. I'll just jump and show you this. I'll get back to him in a minute. My personal favorite warlord, who's not the best, but my favorite, is Ulthakar, the Scorpec Destroyer Lord. His trait, whenever an enemy card takes 25% or more of its damage, so it's below 75% health, the card opposite it gets a flat damage boost. Now, one of the great things about Furious Charge is that if your Furious Charge is hard enough, which the Nightbringer is likely to trigger because of his high damage, then you can play it, smack the enemy card, get your flat damage bonus, and then hit it harder in your return attack, especially if you have any kind of melee damage boost when you go into it. Very powerful. Great addition to this card. Then we got the Deceiver. Oh, shields. So most of these I've looked at, a couple of these I hadn't. This is one I hadn't looked at. Yikes. So he already had that outflank, which is the one that can just steal boost from your opponent when you play and give yourself that attack boost as well. Very good. He's also on the cheaper side for the Satan with high hit points and a very good ranged attack. He's still kind of middling on stats with all three of the ones before, of course, showing him up, but a nice balance between ranged and melee is really good. Outflank is very powerful. I think he was probably underperforming the others, and so he got arguably one of the more powerful traits. Shields. Even if it's only rank 2 shields, one shield can block with his... So the shields will block, let's see. Shields block 60% of their full health. So if something hits him for, what is that, 160% of health, which would have to be in the 500 damage range, ish, give or take. It'd be an extremely powerful attack that'll hit him at all of his shields, so his shield is likely to prevent all damage from 1 up to 2 attacks, which is really good on a card this big and powerful. That makes him just a giant block that you can't really get past. Counters a lot of the Furious Charge we've been seeing from some other cards. That's a great add. I'm a little surprised to see that because I didn't think the Deceiver was doing that poorly. Next up we have this guy. This is one of the most common alternatives to the Sun Eater, just because it had Barrage built in, but it only had that single trait. Now it's also got Outflank to help kind of benefit that. But Outflank, again, being one of the weaker traits, this one didn't need as much help as some other cards. So the Omni levels here, giving it higher bonuses to damage and health, with a max health of 400. Wow, that's an obnoxious card. This guy did get a buff from the Omni levels, but already was fairly powerful, so got Outflank. Outflank is a powerful ability, but it's again one of the weaker ones, but being legendary, having rank 4 Outflank is no joke. So that's a really big debuff and a really big buff to yourself. That's one of the better improved cards, and gets extra bonus because it already was seeing a lot of play, and is an extraordinarily powerful card. Jumping straight to this one, this is another one of those ranged barrage fallbacks to the Sun Eater. Maxes out at a lower attack damage and a lower health, but still very high on both. Costs 50, so it costs significantly less than either of the other two, and got that precision shot. So the combination of barrage and precision shot is amazing, because if you play it on your turn, it shoots, that barrage hits everything on the board, then you can shoot again in your turn and hit everything on the board. That's a devastating play. If it's not your turn, it's still very powerful. Guarantees you can finish off an injured card or hit something really hard before it can attack you back. Yeah, that is a terrific combination. Any cards I see that got that combination, big stocks up. Even if it's only rank 2 and an epic card, that's still very good. Because hitting for about half of 100 is a really nice, that's a good hit. And jump straight up to Unrunk here, and this is one who needed help. I don't think anyone played him. At 34 points with melee ready, he just didn't really make sense anywhere, even with the high melee attack. So they've heavily beefed his melee attack and then given him Furious Charge, which makes him one of the most improved cards in the Necron faction. I've already been running him in my... what deck was that? I don't remember. But I've been running him in some fun decks. He works really well with that Ulthakar to get that damage boost, but just hits really, really hard. So, great big boost to melee. That Furious Charge is great. Also his Furious Charge 4 because he's legendary. Terrific. I expect to see him get a lot more play, which is cool because he wasn't seeing much. Seamut is one of the most played cards in the entire Necron faction, having that Inspire, being pretty hard to remove. He's got 175 health. Most decks had a way to mitigate that or make something scarier so he could stick around for a while. But clearly they felt he needed a bump because he got shields, and being legendary he got rank 4 shields. So he can completely ignore up to 4 attacks at that 275 health. That's going to make him really obnoxious at high levels. And also being legendary, you're a lot more likely to see copies of this with shields, more than likely that rank 2, because you'll see a fair number of players running at the level 7 legendary card. So you're probably going to see a lot of these shielded. That's going to make it significantly harder to remove. That's really going to be a big bump to Necron decks because of how often this guy was played. You probably see a fair number of players who haven't even changed their decks around secondary traits. They're just playing what they did because they're not trying to maximize that. And Seamut is going to be the most forgiving on that count because he's already in most decks, and that's a really, really powerful ability. And he gets level 1 shields at level 3. So chances are you're rarely going to see Seamut without at least a single shield. This guy. Oricon. You do see him fairly often. He's decent. He's got a lot of hit points. Is cheap. Is Medicae. But is just kind of fine. He's sort of a weird piece to slot in. He works really well in Manifest Nightmare decks because he only has the single attack stat, so he's a lot more likely to resist incoming damage. He's a ranged debuff, which can be really nice in a Stormlord deck, because if you ready, he will do damage, but then also remove a ranged buff from an enemy. So he's not bad. He was seeing a fair amount of play, again, because of his cost, hit points, and that Medicae. Medicae is a very common, very popular ability, and you want some in most decks. So the addition of regen on him, and especially topping it at rank 2 regen, it's fine. It's not going to help him much, but he didn't really need help. His Medicae is probably I probably said this before, but I'll say it again. Medicae is probably the single worst trait to have at level 2. Because at level 1, you gain 4 wounds per turn. Ooh, that's great. That is per player turn, so you get 4 on your turn, 4 on your opponent's turn, and then back and forth. But he's going to be taking more damage than that. And so it's going to top him off a little bit, but even at maximum level, getting that 8 wounds per turn isn't going to make a difference. But he had to get a second trait, so that's what he got. It's in theme. Excuse me. Ooh, yeah. Marshal of the Host is the other Inspire card that sees a lot of play. He usually competes directly with Seamet, and most people usually find the points to use Seamet instead, but I do see him fairly often. He's a fair bit cheaper, leans on range, so he doesn't have that melee attack stat and doesn't have nearly the same amount of health, but again is significantly cheaper. Already had that Inspire, and now got that Precision Shot. It's lower. His absolute max attack is 60, so you're looking at like high 30s on your drop damage, so it's fine, but he didn't need help. He's a card that still came up fairly often, and I expect to see a lot of play either way. This being one of the better traits you can get, I do still like it. Next up we have this thing. This thing is terrifying. This guy is one of the highest, like the best combination of points to ranged attack you can get. He's quite cheap, and he hits quite hard. And so him getting Precision Shot is pretty good. And this is where it's different though, because his root trait is target acquired, which actually stacks. So one thing I kind of missed on this guy is while his primary attack stat is somewhat low, he does have Inspire, so it's actually going to be a little bit higher. And that's the reason I brought that up, is it's the same thing with this guy. He's going to hit the card across from him with target acquired. That card will take a flat damage boost of 25 or 20+%, and then on top of your ranged hit. So he already has a higher ranged attack, has that Precision Shot, so that's pretty good. Especially because that can strip a shield. Say you drop him to do target acquired. Say you drop him to do target acquired on a heavy shielded target, you want to clear those shields. That's one fewer shield for your other cards to shoot through before they hit that. So in terms of shield removal, that's very powerful, and that's where I would rank this guy quite a bit higher than the Marshal. Both because he serves a different role, doesn't compete directly with Seamet, and that Precision Shot does combine with his ability in a little bit better ways than the Marshal's does. Go on to this guy. Already had this in Rage, or Berserk. So that's a good one. And then he got Heal, which again, this is a funny one. I feel like I see him a lot, but he's never terribly dangerous, so he doesn't perform all that well. But he's a good card, good mainstay. He's cheap. That max level Berserk already makes him very powerful. And getting that rank 2 regen, it's not nothing, but it might as well be. That said, I do really like the combination of regen and Berserk. We'll see that a couple other times, and he's one of the better cases for it, just because of that cost. So he's okay. Still going to see a lot of play because he already did. I don't think this is going to encourage anyone to put him in a deck where he wasn't there already. And that's all of those. Go to the Warlords. I'm only going to cover the epics and legendaries. Manifest Nightmare. This one is terrific. So what he does is any incoming damage, if it's not an attack type that card has, so say your only melee card gets hit with a ranged shot, they will take 40% less of a hit. That stacks with Fear, that stacks with Taunt, so your cards become quite durable. And so we talked about that a couple times. Any cards with regen benefit from that significantly. Oricon, the Diviner I looked at, he can really benefit from that because he only has the one attack stat. This also is one of the cheaper Warlords, extremely powerful all-game ability that triggers no matter what you're doing. Already had base Fear, very powerful, gained outflank. This was arguably the most powerful Necron Warlord already. Not played a lot, but if you get him at really high level, his ability is so good at keeping your cards alive that he's very competitive. So he got the least upgrade of any of these. Next up we have Nemesis, and he's a really weird one. A couple things about him is he gives a random, every turn it's random whether he gives your team a ranged or a melee buff. So the cards can get up and down in their offensive power sort of randomly. In my personal experience, he's very good, but you get the wrong bonus at the wrong time so often that he's a little bit obnoxious. And it's because it gives you a buff. When it goes to the opposite buff, you're just like, he debuffed my cards, which he doesn't. He doesn't take away from their attacks, but when you lose the bonus you had, it feels like you're losing that. So that's just kind of a psychological thing I have to get past. The other thing about him, too, is the first time he would take damage, his card is removed from the board and is replaced with a beefy taunt melee card. One thing I can't see here is what secondary trait the Varguard, his taunt bodyguard, got. I'm not sure, I'd have to look that up, but... so he already had that outflank, and because you play him twice, that's quite good. You play him once, he takes the shot, is replaced by his bodyguard, and then you play him again, he gets that second outflank. So that was already a pretty powerful combo because you get it twice by default every game. And then he's also gained Inspiring Presence, which at max rank 2 is good. I'm never going to say Inspire is bad because you're doing that bonus. It also stacks with his kind of random bonus, so... if the stars align correctly, it could, instead of being 20%, it could be 35. So it could go up to basically Inspiring Presence 4, it's just a little bit random. So it's fine. He's one of the more powerful warlords, got kind of a middling ability that does combo neatly with his kind of other stuff. I do want to see what the Varguard got. If the Varguard got Furious Charge, that's awesome. But I'd have to see. And I already talked about Uthakar a little bit, just because he's one of my favorites, and several of the cards that got upgraded really benefit from his ability. Next up is going to be Imhotep, the Stormlord. Already had max level Inspire and a very high ranged attack, especially for a Warlord, and a really high hit points. He's expensive, but his native ability is anytime your card readies, it just does 20 damage to the opposing team. So you can give them a debuff, you can give yourself a buff, whatever their ready does, and then just do damage anyway. So you can do that defensive ready with your whole board, and it will then do consistent damage to the opponent. So it's a really powerful ability. He's one of the more powerful warlords, Necron warlords, but he's tricky to play. But with the additional hit points and that Inspire, he's very powerful. And he got the additional beneficial trait of Barrage. With this guy with max level Inspire, with a bit of a ranged bonus and that much health, that Barrage is super good. One of the best ways to deal with the Stormlord is to put something heavy in front of him that can tank the hits, and then have your flankers on the left and right kind of hit him in the middle, and that's how you tend to get him without suffering his ranged attack. That option has now been removed. So kind of the key, most successful way to take down the Stormlord has been removed. I expect him to perform significantly better. I thought he was already doing well. Apparently he was not, because that is a major buff to that card. Again, especially as legendary, because he's going to get the level 4 at top level. So that's pretty solid. I'm excited to try him, actually, because again, at level 6, which I'm sitting on right now, he already has Barrage 1, which is not a lot of damage, but because of the sheer volume of damage he's already doing, is quite hard-hitting. So that's great. Next up we have Tau. Cruising through it. I hope you're still with me. If you need to take a quick break, quick breather, I will take a water break too. And then we'll get into Tau. Tau is one of the smaller factions, not as many cards, but they do have a high proportion of legendary and rare, so this is going to take a second. Okay, first is probably the best card in the... Oh my god, really? Okay, best is the wrong word. This is the single most powerful card in the Tau lineup. You do see this very frequently in play, and can be a game-turning card just because of how powerful it is. Tons of hit points, really high damage, both ranged and melee. Had that precision shot already, so it hits really, really hard, especially in something like an Enva deck where he gets bonuses as he's hit. Even as you're taking this thing down, he's hitting you back even harder. So, very much improved. And he got shields. That's... wow. So that makes him incredibly hard to remove, so the strategy of ignore that and kill everything else holds. And think about that, I mentioned Enva. We'll get to that when I get to the warlords. But on Va, whenever your card takes damage, it gains a percentage of attack bonus in that stat. So if you shoot this guy really hard, he will hit you back with an even more powerful range shot because his shot will be improved by the damage he takes. Now that's where the double edge of shield comes up because it's really powerful, but that's at 1 to 2 turns where he's not buffing his damage. Not that he needs it with a base 100, but that is kind of the up and down of that. So where I can see that they could give him shields without worrying about it too much. So that's cool. Already sees a lot of play. I expect to see even more. If you see a couple of these shielded, that's going to be pretty tough to get through. Next up, the other giant battlesuit, it's kind of the other Riptide. The Forge World Riptide, the Urvarna, already had Big Game Hunter and got Precision Shot. I mentioned this combo a couple times. We're seeing most of the Big Game Hunter cards were underperforming a little bit because of that issue I said, where usually you're going to put it against something that could kill it back, and that's kind of a tough matchup. And for a card this expensive, that's not what you want. So the combination of Big Game Hunter and Precision Shot is extremely powerful, especially in a card this big and this durable. That and Legendary again, so that max level Precision Shot 4. You're hitting for 134 damage plus 75%. So that is nearly, that's well over 200 damage against a 40 plus cost card. So that thing is really going to hurt because of that. Hugely improved. I did see it played, but not all that often. I don't know that many people have them highly leveled, but that's a huge powerful addition to it, and that's going to come into play very quickly. You can see mine's only level 5 and already has Precision Shot level 1, which isn't amazing, but it's certainly not nothing, and is a major bump to where this card was before. So it definitely encourages me to play him more. Next up is the ever-terrifying Barracuda. This thing already had Barrage and an incredibly high range stat. So the Omni levels really impacted this, making it more powerful. Because it was already one of the most played cards in Tau decks, it just got outflank, which is good. There's nothing wrong with that. But it is just not significantly changed. Whew, boy. Long Strike already had that Precision Shot, so it was going to level that up quickly, and now also got Inspiring Presence. Inspiring Presence is always good, especially in a deck that has such high attack stats as Tau does for ranged attacks, so that's really, really powerful, especially since that also stacks on him. Because his range damage is so high that you start adding 10, 20, 30% to that damage, it adds up very quickly. So this guy, you drop him with his max level Inspire, max level Shot, he's hitting for the better part of 400 damage. Well, actually, even without Inspire, he's hitting for almost 400 damage. On the drop, which is incredibly powerful. There's almost nothing in the game that can stand up to that drop when he is played. So you gotta watch out for that guy. Next we have the other epic. We have the Skyray Gunship, which is one I also saw played fairly often. It's on the cheaper side, has a really high range stat, and Big Game Hunter. Really powerful combination, so it just got outflank. I didn't see it played that much, but it's a card that could quickly get out of hand if overpowered, so I see why they didn't beef this guy more than they did, even though they could have based on win or play rate. Still good. I'm still going to run it sometimes. But yeah, expect it to perform well, even though it got a lesser added trait. And it's epic, so it doesn't matter, because you're not going to see that till level 9 anyway. Likewise, this is the lesser Barrage car. Got Ready. I think Ready is in some ways better than Outflank. This guy probably was underperforming the other Barrage cards. Because Ready will charge up your ranged attacks even if your opponent doesn't have a bonus. So it can be more powerful than stealing. And so the rank 2 readies twice. That's a significant bonus. So that's actually a really big improvement to this, even if it takes a while to get there. Still an extremely powerful card. Really didn't need help. So that's a better bump than I would have expected. Next up, this guy. Oh yeah, gross. I see this guy fairly often. He performs okay. I think he's in a lot of winning decks, even though he himself doesn't really make the difference. He's just good. In a he's fine kind of way. So high hit points, high range damage, already had outflank, and now gets regeneration 2. That is going to do well in Onva decks, give him a little more staying power with the high hit points. You never know when that little extra health could actually benefit this guy. But I don't expect that to change much, especially since Tau only has a single Medicae card, so they have very little healing. Could also benefit from a Oh, what's his face? We'll get to that. Next legendary is a bit of a weird one. This guy already had shields. He now has also gained Inspiring Presence. Being a melee dedicated card in Tau is very weird. But adding shields, so adding his Inspiring Presence to shields encourages people to take him. People really didn't because there's no reason to. The other Inspire cards also are fairly melee heavy, so adding that to him makes it much more encouragement to take him. Since he already had shields, that addition of Inspiring Presence is very good. You can use him as a defensive melee, or you can get weird and try to do a melee Tau deck and see what happens. But that would do best in an Enva deck, and because he has shields, he gets the least benefit from Enva because he's not taking damage to buff his attack. That said, he has Inspiring Presence and a high melee attack already, so you may not need it. So, interesting play, significantly improved. Don't know if he's going to slot into that many decks anyway. Cruising on up. This thing is amazing for 17 points. It's in almost every single Tau deck. Already had that range ready. Did not need to improve at all. So already got the bonus from the Omni level, and then also got Outflank up to rank 2. Extremely powerful card. We're still going to see it played a lot, and that's going to have an impact on games. One thing to note here is that even though I consider Outflank to be one of the weaker abilities, that so many more cards have it, mean it's going to come into play a lot more often in your games. So expect to play a lot more games where you are debuffed against your opponent when it comes to be your turn to attack. Next, the zero attack. This is funny. It's in theme with his abilities. I see this guy played a lot because he's 3 points and has a lot of health for that, and then has that target acquired. Very powerful in a heavy range shooting deck when you really need to remove something. He also gained the Scout 1, and that's going to go up to Scout 2. So he will just, every time he readies and when you play him, he's going to improve your range damage and do that target acquired. I would say that's significantly improved. I didn't see him played all that much, but I use him a lot, and I think he's an extremely powerful card. So kind of flat, but yeah, not bad. And then the warlords, most of them. I would say that, for me personally, I think the best warlord is Shazo Relay. I'm probably saying that wrong. Anyway, but my second best and vote for possibly the most powerful is Darkstrider. He is not epic or legendary, so he didn't change, but he did improve a little bit because of some of the epic and legendary traits you see. So like that Inspiring Presence on Longstrike is very powerful with him, just because he just hits so hard that every time you move Longstrike and get the additional attack, it'll hit even harder. And any other card you have on board will also get that Inspiring Presence before it's hit too. So that's the big one there. Anything that got Inspiring Presence is very powerful with Darkstrider, especially if it also has a heavy attack itself. Enva, first on our list. He already had Inspiring Presence, very good. He got Shields, which is a massive buff for Enva. The thing about him is usually you still have a ranged deck with Enva, so it does a lot of shooting, so the fact that he doesn't shoot has always been a weakness. His also max melee is pretty sad, and he does have a decent amount of hit points, but it's still, if Enva's on the table, your chances of winning the game go down considerably. So you didn't even want to use that Inspiring Presence because you didn't want him on the board where he was vulnerable. And if you're fighting against an Enva, the best way to deal with it is to go straight for the Warlord. So Shields fills in that weakness. Again, he is legendary, so he will get a lot of shields. Flip side, it means that he won't gain melee attacks. So against a melee deck, he would normally beef up and get pretty scary, but he starts out so low and his hit points aren't that high to the point where that really wasn't worth it. And I think that him being vulnerable himself really held back this deck. Expect Enva to make a big showing this season because of that addition. That's huge. 1 shield is really good, 2 shields is amazing. If he gets up to 4 shields, this sucker is going to be really hard to deal with. He's not getting a benefit from his ability, but you know what? That's fine. Next up we have Shadow Sun. And Shadow Sun and Farsight both got the same ability. I'm going to talk about them kind of both, because they both have very similar profiles where they both use their primary attack stat on the drop. They both gained Inspiring Presence. But they've got an extra ability where whenever you drop them, it fully heals all of your surviving Tau cards on the board, which is excellent. And then they also get a bonus to ranged attack. So she will get a bonus to range attack. So for me right now at level 7, instead of 74, she'd have a base 90, and then would do her precision shot. So hits really hard, and then the extra additional bonus of Inspiring Presence. Fantastic. Yes, epic, so she's not going to get a high level of Inspiring Presence, but since both Shadow Sun and Farsight already hit really, really hard, her in ranged, him in melee, and fully heal their bodyguards, chances are you will have a full board. You'll get the full advantage of that Inspiring Presence, and they both are pretty decent tanky warlords in their own right. So I expect both of them to perk up just a little bit. They're not as improved as Enva, but they're still very, very strong. And then Shaz, this guy, and I should talk about this. So her ability gives them all their flat bonus to ranged attack, then she hits. Farsight heals both of his bodyguards to full health, and then also supercharges his melee attack stat. On top of already having a really high melee and getting Furious Charge himself, he is what I call a Highlander deck. He's a warlord designed where you weaken the enemy deck, you pull their warlord into the field, and then you just smack him as hard as you can. So that, the Inspiring Presence does kind of add just a little bit extra to what he was already doing. Shaz O's ability is every turn you go through this rotation. You start with a 20% bonus to ranged attacks, then you go to a 40% bonus to ranged attacks, and then you take a 20% damage reduction, and then you start over. It's this cycling flat bonus. It is easy to underestimate how good this is, especially with the powerful shooting that Tau already have. You're just like, here you go, here's Inspiring Presence, here's Precision Shot, and here's a plus 20% ranged attack. Like, this guy is devastating, and comes flat with shields. He is epic, so it takes a really long time to level him up to where he has a meaningful number of shields, but he is a extremely powerful warlord, and I think probably the best in the faction. Especially because his ability triggers all game long and doesn't rely on your opponent doing anything. So Enva has to take damage to benefit. Shadow Sun and Farsight, they both only benefit once they're played. Darkstrider is extremely powerful but very flimsy. This guy is not flimsy. His ability is very powerful. And even Darkstrider's ability, it only triggers if one of your cards dies. This guy's doesn't. You just get it. So if you have a board of your heaviest ranged hitters, they can just hammer the opponent's deck with this guy, which is exactly where Tau wants to be. Exceptional. Gained that precision shot. He's epic, so it only gets rank 2. But that, again, considering how powerful this guy already was, I'm a little surprised that he got that trait, because that's a really good one. Again, even rank 1 is still very powerful for removing shields. So while it takes a while to get there, while it's still one of the weaker traits, being able to remove a shield from an enemy warlord is very, very good, especially since we've now seen a couple warlords gaining shields, and so a shielded warlord is going to be more common than it was before. So, very good, stocks up. That is our Tau. Cruising right along. I hope you're still with me. If so, you are a champ. If you pause this and come back to it later, probably healthy, but I'm going to power through. I don't know where there would be a good stopping point, so we'll just keep going. Alright, Dominator! I rarely ever see this card. It's extremely powerful, and I like it. Already had this outflank, so it, again, is legendary and got the addition of Barrage. With that very high ranged attack stat, that is a significantly improved card, and now is much more tempting to take than it was. So, card that needed help, got help. This guy, epic, extremely slow to level up, very expensive, not very powerful at low level, needed help. Has regen. This is a case where regen is good because his base trait was regen. So he'll get to rank 4 regen, which is a lot more meaningful than rank 2 regen because it's twice as good. Also really meant to be in decks with the Magus, the Techmarine Warlord, who will also do sustained healing while this guy's on the board. So that's really good. He also has a balance of range and melee attack, and they added on Big Game Hunter, which is really good because this is a guy where he heals, he's got a lot of sustain, but if put up against one of the harder hitting 40 plus cost cards, can't go 1-1. He's really meant to kind of pick on weaker stuff and just block up a lane. So Big Game Hunter gives him a nice little boost to do a little bit better there. Again, epic, it's going to take a really long time to level him up anywhere near there. Mine's only level 4. Yeah, so, he's fine. I'm still not taking him. Celestine. This cracked me up when I saw this. Celestine got endless. Again, this is a case where cards that were underperforming got the best bonus. I saw Celestine all the time, and this card has scared the crap out of me forever. So getting endless on her is a shocker, and whoo, boom. I would argue most improved card in the Servants of the Emperor faction. Super, super good. Combos beautifully with the Canoness, who we'll talk about in the end there. That's amazing. And as someone who also has a personal vendetta against Badruk, having an endless card with 200 hit points is fantastic, because that will actually block a lane and prevent a board wipe, which is awesome. Huge, huge upgrade. Stock's way up on this one. Even Endless rank 1, that is an extremely powerful card. And it can go up to Endless rank 4 with that Inspire rank 4, and the Omni levels giving her a higher max damage. So I bring her a lot for her Inspire. She's just a beefcake. I do see this being kind of a parity upgrade, because she is at 45 points, so she already was going to be hit hard by Big Game Hunter, which a bunch of cards have gained. So I can see that being a quote-unquote necessary addition, but it's just hilariously fun. So I really love this card. The one thing that concerns me about it is now if you do a really elite Greyfax deck, this is now a terrifying monstrosity that I never want to see. And haven't yet. I've been lucky. Next up, the Inquisitor. I love this card. It's very weird to slot him into a deck because he doesn't combo with kind of the key ones. So like Canoness, he's okay in a Greyfax deck. Doesn't make a lot of sense in the others just because of price point and range damage. But he's got a really nice balance of ranged and melee. And he has Fear, which is terrific to just stick and just not die. So I really like him. Great card. It's taken me a really long time to level him up this much. And that's probably what's holding him back the most. So, again, somewhat middling damage, so that Inspiring Presence is the perfect add to him. He was already a very powerful card, so it's another case where he wasn't being played that much, but if they gave him too much of a bonus, he would be out of control quickly, so I get why they settled on Inspiring Presence, which is really good for him. And we'll because he just sits there and doesn't die, having a global ability that benefits your other cards is a really good bonus to him, so stock's way up on that guy. Call was already the most obnoxious, unmovable hunk of metal in the game. He's expensive, but he's got high Medicae and really high hit points, especially for Medicae. Pops up a lot in... oh man, what's his name? I'll remember this later. There's the Warlord that lets you redeploy your Servants of the Emperor cards. If you play this guy 3 times in a game, he's just going to be rolling around with 600 health and then regenerating, and rank 4 regen because he's legendary. He's already was seeing a lot of play, will continue to see a lot of play, and going to get even more obnoxious, just because he's a chunk of health. He will be hurt a little bit by the sheer volume of cards getting that Big Game Hunter, but I feel like that's one of the reasons why so many cards are getting Big Game Hunter. And we've got Trajan Valoris. Hits like a tank. Already had the absolutely wonderful Furious Charge, and also gained that Inspiring Presence, which is very lore appropriate. I think that's the biggest reason for it. Very powerful. He's epic, so it's only going to top out at range 2. So again, kind of a side grade, just to keep parity with the other epic cards in the game. Still sees a lot of play. Will continue to see a lot of play. This guy pops up in a lot. Oh wow, I didn't even realize that. This is a bonkers combo on one of the most common, most powerful cards in the Servants faction. I hadn't even seen this. Again, it's a good thing that this only triggers at level 9, so you're not going to come into it that much, where you will see a level 3 Psionic Blast out of this guy quite often, because that comes at level 7. Very powerful card. Good hit points, good health. Seen a lot in Greyfax decks, because the bonus to all stats really stacks well with him, especially with that area of effect Psionic Blast. Whatever, it is a Psychic Blast. Really good, and the addition of Big Game Hunter, wow, because that will apply to Psionic Blast, so when he's blasting the board, that means that your 40 plus cost cards are going to take more damage. And even rank 1 is a 30% bonus to damage. So that is significant. And then that 45%, that's going to make him meaningfully better. Also probably to counter some of the more improved high cost cards, but Yeah, surprising bonus. And I think that's the only case of this combination where you have Big Game Hunter and the Psionic Blast. It also does beef up his melee a little bit, because he's a priority target. A lot of cards will be put to take him down, and if he's put up against a powerful melee hitter, this lets him hit back a little bit more the way he was supposed to, kind of based on lore. So I like it. It's going to be... I may be overselling it. I have to actually see it in play, and it's pretty rare to see an Inquisitor at level 9 or higher. So we'll see where that goes. It's a good stat to add to him. Very thematic. I like it, but it seems like it may be a hair on the powerful side. We'll have to see. Next up, we have Junith Erewhita, who almost never sees play. Barrage is very powerful, but her combination of cost, health, and then range stat, it's good, but it doesn't outcompete the others that are also the Barrage stat, so that was kind of a tricky spot. So what she needed was a boost to damage, which she gets from Inspiring Presence. It's a small boost because she's, again, epic. It's fine. I think she's going to stay middling, but we may see more play, or the people who already played her will see more benefit, so that's cool. Oh, this guy, I love it. This is one of my favorite combinations. So, he's legendary, so both of these traits will be max level. Already had regen, but I rarely included this guy in my decks because he just doesn't do very much damage. So, he can regen like crazy and hold up a lane, but didn't do much damage. So, the addition of up to max level Berserk is awesome. I've already been playing with this guy. He's still low level. I need to level him a bit. But sitting at rank 2 regen and rank 1 Berserk is already a meaningful difference. He's already significantly better, and as I level him up, I am very excited to see where this guy goes. Stock's way up. That is great. Especially if you have any other abilities that can kind of combo with that. Like you throw in some Medicae, you throw in some other damage buffs. Absolutely terrific. Sancta, the only reason I have not run her a lot is because she's, again, epic, a new card, and so she's really low level. Mine, again, is only level 3. Already had shields, which makes her worth taking. Gained Furious Charge, so stock's way up on that. A shielded card at 28 points is extremely powerful, especially one that both has ranged and melee. Gaining that Furious Charge is a really nice bump. She probably wasn't seeing much play or much successful play, just again because she's so hard to level, but I think a high-level version of her is going to be excellent. Of course, being epic, you're really only going to see those shields for a while until people start getting into those upper levels. It's going to take a while. Still, good ability bonus. I like that. Ooh, Eisenhorn. This is a funny one. So I got this card as a campaign reward. Once every 6 months or so, there's another campaign that gives you the opportunity to earn Eisenhorn. So I did not pay for him. But I do have him. He already comes max level and has Big Game Hunter, and so whatever trait they gave him, he would automatically get max level, which is hard to balance. So they gave him Target Acquired, which is one of the things I expected the least, but it absolutely makes sense with him being an Inquisitor. Very good. I like the combo. Yeah, so that's a good combo. That is kind of a double-edged sword. He does have that Big Game Hunter and decent health at a fairly cheap cost. So you tend to put him up against really beefy cards to have him sort of weaken them, while other things kind of work around the edges. So seeing him getting Target Acquired is interesting, because that will force your other cards to attack his target. So you have to be a little bit more careful playing him than you were before. But on the flip side, Target Acquired is a really powerful ability. I don't think that Servants had a melee Target Acquired before this. So if you're in a melee deck, you really wanted one, and this is a really nice way to put it. So that's really good. And people were already playing him without that. I expect them to see even more play for the people who have him with that. So that's a cool add. A little bit better than a side grade, but could have been a lot scarier. Next up. Also excellent. This is kind of a weird one. 27 points. Okay health, okay attack stats. This is one of the more common Inspire cards you see. It's good. It has kind of issues with being low level because it's epic. It takes a really long time to stack up to where it competes with the other Inspire cards. I think it's going to continue to do that. At the upper tiers, once you have it leveled, Furious Charge is a really nice bonus to that. So that was a good one to get. But, still going to see it played the same amount. You may occasionally see it get Furious Charge, but you probably won't notice that change for a while. Oh, I love it. Hicks. This is a absolute dream case for where you wanted this combination. He already had Big Game Hunter, very cheap for Big Game Hunter, and a decent hit points, but low enough hit points that you would play this guy and see him usually die before you got full benefit from his ability. So he's the first one that I played where I saw that Furious Charge big Game Hunter combo, and he's a perfect candidate for it. Excellent ad. Love it. Stocks way up. Especially since it can get to max level. You get that rank 4 Furious Charge with that big Game Hunter. This guy's going to be a game-turning card. I really, really like this guy. Especially the second I saw that change, he was in my Canada's deck in a second. I am, really excited about that one. He needed that. Because he's always an exciting, powerful card, but just was underperforming where I expected or needed him to be, and this was a really good way to kind of balance that, so great job. Ooh, that's a good one too. This is another really good combo. The combination of Berserk, so he beefs up his attack stat. If you can keep him on the board for a while, that also makes his Death Blow even more powerful. That's mitigated by the fact that he is epic, so it only goes up to rank 2 Death Blow. I don't know if I've talked about this, I should have, but that just means that when the card dies, it does its damage back to the opposing cards. And even rank 2 is still 90% of its base attack stat. So that's one of the more impactful low-level traits, and especially with Berserk, where he's going to be ramping up his melee damage, that's a really good ad. And very thematic because he is the kind of... Oh, sorry. He is kind of this scary brawler who just gets in the mix and makes a mess. So that's very thematic, and I really like it. He was already seeing a decent amount of play. I expect this will make him more common. And if someone's able to get him to that high level, that's a really good option to have. Keeping through it, my goodness, Servants, you got a lot of cards. Okay, our next assassin. Ooh, man, this is another really exceptional ad, also very thematic as the ranged sniper assassin. Already had target acquired, gaining precision shot on that high range stat at that low cost is excellent. I really, really like to see this. You often had the case where you wanted to snipe something, you would hit it, but just wouldn't hit it hard enough. Once you get to the point where you have that precision shot in there, that's going to be a great ad. And again, very thematic, which I also really like. I like the cases where the added ability can be in theme with what the card's supposed to do without making it overpowered or being wasted. So, that's great. The regen bot. This one is used a lot because it can get max level regen. Very powerful. Has a really good cost to range damage ratio with a good bit of health. That precision shot is just gravy. Stocks way up, but they already were. So, sweet. Iota. This is terrifying. This card is really... He's extremely powerful to lock down a target, especially in a Greyfax Psyker deck. Very frightening. Already saw a lot of play and is very, very powerful, so I'm a little bit shocked to see him get Psionic Blast, which is one of the single best abilities in the game. Just flat default start of your turn, just hit everything on the board for low damage, but it does remove shields. So, exceptional. Especially seeing the number of cards that have gotten shields, including Warlords. That's a really, really good ad. Cannot wait to get that level 9 with this guy, and he's one of my epics that's closest to it, so that's really good. He was already seeing a lot of play. I expect to see him see more. That is one of the more surprising and more impactful secondary traits we've seen, especially on an epic card. Good stuff. Draxus. This is a card that you see sometimes I never use, because her stats suck. For 21 points to this damage, who cares? So she always had Big Game Hunter, which does percent-based increase to damage, which is just sad with those attack stats. So card I never used. So she got one of the more powerful abilities, Poison. She's going to top out at Poison rank 2, which is in theme with her card being just bad. People play her, people like her, whatever. I think that this card is a waste of space. Moving on. So she's got an attack in every stat, which is good and rare in Servants. Especially Poison rank 2, that's one of those things that you need to have rank 3 or higher. Poison rank 2 is barely going to make a difference, and you're only going to see that at absolute maximum level. And that's her stats at maximum level, all the way upgraded. You spent a ton of time and cards and gold on her. She's still not good. Stocks are actually down on this as one of the least improved cards that needed it the most. I like the addition of Poison, but rank 2 Poison, really? So, yeah, still not taking it. Sorry to be a downer on that one, but oh man, I don't understand that card. I don't really understand the idea behind it. I don't understand the change to it. It's not good. Yeah, so we'll see the other assassin, the Kalidas assassin. Ooh, outflank. Totally thematic, totally makes sense. One of the more common ones that you see a lot already has really good stats for the cost, and already had max level big game hunter, so didn't really need the help. Yeah, so got it, but yeah, it's fine. Still a good card. Still going to see it a lot. Also, Slime Marbo, extremely common card. You see him a lot because of that max fear and that low cost. Got outflank. So kind of the same story. Still good, still going to see him a lot, but yeah, didn't change much. Let me see if I'm just complete jerk. Yeah, 43 max, but what are you doing? Over here, 67. I mean, still not that much better, but is cheaper and is just better in both stats. Anyway, I'm being a jerk. We'll keep going. This guy, significantly improved. I've talked quite a bit about how much I like Furious Charge. He got Furious Charge. Does not have all that great stats, but being legendary, again, he will get max level Furious Charge and max level Inspiring Presence with a good level of hit points at 16 cost. So, like, cost per stats, this guy's in a really good spot. That was a great ad. Roughly doubled his utility, compensated for that relatively middling melee attack. So he's much improved. That's true of both of the legendary Inspire cards, because they just struggled to compete with the 7-point Inspire card that people take more often. Which, speaking of, Severina Rain. For 12 points, you get just a bonkers hit points and decent stats. Like, she's very good. She's my go-to Inspire. I just got her to that level 3 Inspire, and that was really what I was waiting for. She's good. She's good. She's improved. I like that outflank on her. I expected something a little bit more powerful, because she was specifically named as a card that got a big bump. Nothing wrong with outflank, especially since she can go up to rank 4 outflank, but I still take her. Still kind of my go-to Inspire. Alright, next up. I love this one. And this is funny that I love this one. So I got really excited about this when I first saw it, but now let me dig into it a little bit more. So 6 points, extremely cheap, already had Precision Shot, which is great, and has gained Poison. So she can apply Poison when she drops. But rethinking about it, I got really excited about this in the base. Being able to apply Poison immediately is good, especially against Fear. And against shield. It's that little extra edge in damage that you can get, and her being 6 points makes it considerably more valuable. It's only 8 damage per turn, but that could swing the difference. If you're already taking a 6-point card to do a significant amount of range damage, it's a good kind of bonus to her. And it's one of the most powerful abilities that she could get, again being at 6 points. So I'm still pretty excited about that. That's good. Yeah. But that rank 2 poison is not very meaningful. I really don't consider poison below rank 3, and of course at rank 4 it's extremely powerful. Rank 1 is basically useless, except to really power up your opponent's Berserk cards. So do not hit a Berserk card with poison 1, you will regret it. But yeah, still good. Still 6 points, still very powerful, so I think for the cost she is excellent. And that poison ad is not bad, but is going to be more impactful at max level, and even then. So you're unlikely to ever see that, but could be useful. And I think that's our last card. So on to bodyguards. Default Commissar Yarick. This is an excellent ad. He has the distinction of being the absolute cheapest servant's warlord. Excuse me. Came with Inspiring Presence, which is good. His ability is that anytime one of your cards dies, one of the others readies. Twice. So you get really big attack bonuses very quickly. See him with a lot of kind of expendable troop cards and then really heavy hitting ranged attackers. One of the more powerful warlords, and him getting Furious Charge is really, really nice. Even if it's still not going to be terribly impactful, again, because he's epic, so it's only going to hit rank 1, maybe rank 2, and his max attack stat's not very high, even with that Inspire. It can swing a game if you are playing when it's not your turn. So if it's a really close game, it could swing it. And if you've been building up your melee all game, it could really swing it. So it's not bad, but I wouldn't expect it to change things too much. But he didn't really need that much help. Creed, there it is. I was talking about a guy who can have your cards redeploy. If you put the... what's his face? Call. Belisarius Call, the regen monster, in this guy's deck, where you play him 3 times, he's just going to have an insane amount of health. So this guy started with Outflank. He is a warlord where if he is on the table, you have probably lost. Extremely powerful decks, but he himself is very flimsy, and you just don't want to play him. So even though he had Outflank, that's great. He's got Inspiring Presence. Max at rank 2, you still just don't want to play the guy. If anyone needed a shield, it's him, and he did not get one. So, still one of the most powerful warlords, so he got kind of a middling ability, which, that's fine. Canoness. I mentioned a couple times how powerful she is, especially with some of those Furious Charge cards, and especially with that Endless St. Celestine. Crazy good. So she already had shields, she got Inspiring Presence. Most of these warlords are epic, so even though they got better traits, it's just kind of middling. She's another card where she has shield, so if you do play her, you haven't lost the game outright, but it's definitely getting risky. So getting her and her surviving warlords that little damage boost to kind of finish off the game is really good. That'll of course benefit her, and then it will benefit whatever else you still have alive on the board. So I'm pretty happy with that. I would say her deck is one of the most improved by a mile in this, because she benefits from several of the more powerful legendaries, and was one of the more powerful warlords, but definitely needed some help. So while she herself didn't get that much help, her decks are significantly better. So that's one I wanted to make sure to highlight. Next up is, of course, Greyfax, the monstrosity herself. She got Big Game Hunter. Oof! She already hits so hard, and one of the few reliable ways to take her down was to pull her, kill enough of bodyguards to get her on the table, and then use one of those headhunter warlords, or Highlander warlords like Farsight, to just hit her really hard and take her down in one swoop before she was able to hit back. That's still the strategy, but it's going to be made considerably more risky by a rank 4 Big Game Hunter. Again, on a legendary, you're likely to see rank 1 and 2. See, I'm sitting on a rank 2 Big Game Hunter. You're likely to see that pretty often. So that is a big bump to her as an already very frightening warlord. So I'm a little surprised by that one. I think one of the reasons for that, again, is those scary Endless cards. Could be used to cheese her and bring her down, but I think she kind of needed that weakness. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes. Last but not least, we have Morven Val, who is the coolest warlord. Just got this gothic golden holy armor suit. I freaking love this thing. I should talk about this, sorry. Talk about these. So Creed's ability, when one of your friendly cards is destroyed, all your surviving cards come back to your hand up to twice, so you can then redeploy them. Super powerful. Not quite as good as Lilith, but with the bodyguards he can take and the volume of shields he can take, that can be extremely powerful. If you get really, really high-powered shielded melee cards, he is quite scary. And even with ranged attacks, just being able to redeploy those tanks that'll hit for like 100 damage on the drop is very good. He's one of the higher performing Servants Warlords. Canoness, anytime one of your friendly cards dies, a random one of your surviving cards will do a 75% melee attack. Again, very powerful with that Endless Celestine, just because you get the free attack and then she comes back and can actually reapply the Inspire that you would have lost when she dies. So that's really powerful to get more Endless cards with her, and the extra melee bonus. That's a great one. And then Greyfax has a weird ability. So the less points you spend on your deck, the more powerful those cards get. They get a bonus to attack stats, they get a bonus to health. So we talked about a couple more powerful Psychers. If you leave, I'd have to redo the math, but I want to say if you leave 70 points unspent in your deck, you get a pretty reasonable 45% buff to all of your cards. She's extremely powerful and can really, really power up some very cheap cards. So that's really good, and she's quite scary. And then Val, I do think that Val is my favorite Servants of the Emperor Warlord. You can see that mine is pretty low level. I've been working hard to get her leveled up, but she's one of the newer warlords, is a pretty rare drop, so it takes some time. But she's got that fear, she's got that inspiring presence. She's a card who is tremendously durable. At this low level, she already has that fear, she's got that decent health, and then she's got her native ability, which is every time you play a card, it gets 3 charges of a flat negative 1/3 damage. So makes them very, very tough. That stacks with fear and taunt. So if you play a taunt card with her, that thing is just not going to die, which is super fun. Yeah, so incredibly powerful. She really does supercharge some cards, and the reason I like her is it doesn't have a specific synergy with melee, ranged, or anything else. So I build decks with her that use cards that I wouldn't use in other Warlord decks. So that's one of the reasons I like her so much. And that's also why she's so durable. But in the endgame, she's vulnerable to Big Game Hunter, being over 40 points, and struggles a little bit to actually deal damage. At max level, less so, but kind of middling early levels, she really can struggle. So that Inspiring Presence coming in early is a really nice buff, and kind of exactly what she needed. And that also applies to any surviving bodyguards you may have. So it's such a durable deck, struggled in the end game, and so that's exactly what she needed, even though it is one of the arguably weaker adds she could get. She already had Fear. So yeah, stock's way up. That is terrific. And again, Legendary says she can get that Inspire level 4. That is half. You know what, guys? I'm going to go ahead and, well, folks, excuse me. I'm going to go ahead and take a break here. I will record the second half later on. But yeah, hope it was useful. If there's anything else you'd like to see, I have thought about doing like a Warlord guide, so shorter videos about each specific Warlord that would both cover how to play that Warlord and how to counter that Warlord. So there was a recent ask in the Reddit about how to counter Greyfax. So I would do some sort of discussion about strengths and weaknesses of Greyfax and play some games with her so you can kind of see how it all works together. If you want to see that, drop me a comment, drop me a like, drop me a subscribe, whatever you want. So Casual Dad here signing out. I will be back shortly to do the last 5 factions.